So, welcome everybody to this session of iMoot 2016, where we've got Ben Haensel, who's joining us from Minnesota, and is going to be telling us about creating reports using, I guess, not clickable reports. I've forgotten the name of the plugin, but I'm sure he'll get it right.
Indeed.
So, over to you, Ben, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much. So, when I started at Blue Sky, I noticed in Moodle that at times there was a deficit of the kind of analytics we needed for teaching staff to be able to provide them with the kind of results for what they needed to grade or different sorts of Moodle analytics. So I was very pleased to find that there was a block that not only allowed an administrative role to be able to view reports, but you could create different kind of reports SQL that you could concatenate HTML into, where you could click reports in Moodle that could be created for different roles, not just administrative roles in Moodle. So a little bit about myself. Thank you for my introduction as well too. This is me. I'm this lovely a bald guy here, and it's been a very interesting adventure in the world of education, as some people have different kinds of roles where they get started. I actually have a foundation in music. I don't know what it is about people that love music that get excited about reporting, but there's something that drives me to dig deeper into analytics and a love for the language of report writing, as well as origami. So the basis of this presentation is to help create a better workflow for teachers. And instead of having a more broad topic, I really wanted to especially dig into and share about a particular deficit we've had at our school with teacher grading. And it's one of the things that I've seen in working in an IT role at my school and in working in a teaching role as well, that it can take teachers and faculty a long time to move through student work. One thing that's significantly different about our institution as a 7 through 12 charter in Minnesota that's all online versus blended, we have more of a rolling enrollment where students are starting and ending at different times. So it makes it tricky when you have people in different places to select a particular report that is a particular assessment and then go through that assessment for every student to grade it. So in this presentation, we're going to look at addressing how to utilize a pre-created report using some of these ad hoc reports from Moodle, which I've contributed a few. Also looking at how you can use the Configurable Reports block to add filters and permission to reports, something that's unique to that plugin. So I have to concede that while this is an awesome plugin, I'm glad to see other people really digging in and utilizing this. This was created by another gentleman across the pond who had authored this. So kudos to Juan and everything he's done to maintain this plugin. So really, this is an adventure in finding the data that's useful for your staff, because I found that even when you're creating a report, that unless you can have that coordination and communication with the faculty that you're presenting this information to, unless it's organized in a manner that's useful for them, they're not going to be able to well utilize it. So we want to put this data together in a way, in a report, that's something that will work for them. And I can tell you time again that unless you have that communication piece in there to coordinate with your faculty, and you just make something that you think is going to work, it may just end up being white noise to them and may not be something entirely useful. So you really have to work to have that coordination with your different staff roles to provide them with the kinds of information that they require. Now, I've noticed that there are some significant differences between the Configurable Reports plugin and AddMiner. What I like about AddMiner is that you can do a lot of different kinds of things that you would with a MySQL Workbench. It's less gated. And like, for instance, with Configurable Reports, you can't have multiple queries within a single report. where you set a variable, for instance. But then again, the configurable reports is great because you can incorporate HTML into a concatenated output so that you can actually have a clickable link in the report outcome. So in configurable reports, you can filter them. Permissions can be applied too, so you can make a report that's specific to a certain role, whether it's an administrative role or teaching faculty, or even a student if you want to create something. I'll later mention as we looked into student dashboard views. I love that you can create URL strings, so you can create different aspects, variables that are clickable, that can bring you to a specific page. And it is possible to even use those reports without necessitating use of SQL. I haven't myself, but I know that that's a possibility. Gotcha. Guido, I'd love to share with you a separate time. I haven't specifically made this a part of my presentation, but at Blue Sky School, we've dug into using groups and groupings, and I've created a number of reports that are contingent on those, and I'd love to dig into that if you're interested. Please touch base with me. And I love that there's just a great number of contributed reports that are ever expanding as a lot of people are adding to Moodle and sharing all the different reports that they have made. So as I shared before, really the impetus for creating the click-to-grade reports that I've worked on is just making things quicker for teachers so that they can have more time to have connections with students, have one-to-one contact, and not have to search for and find or accidentally miss an activity a student completed that requires grading. So some examples of different reports that I've created include teacher grading, some different student activity reports, and there's so many reports that you can find. Some simple ones just like all the users listed in a site by course enrollment, and these are different clickable items you could look into and inspect. There's so many reports. I would encourage you just to take a look and see if you're not sure what kind of report might be useful to you. There's a lot of examples of something you might like on the ad hoc page. So these are some general views of what the block may look like if you haven't used this plugin before. You can see in these two instances, there's a number of these teacher grading reports. In an admin view, you have the capability to manage reports, create and edit those, where a teacher view does not. So this is a view of what this teacher grading report looks like. You can see that I've created a listing of the first and last name of the student, the quiz title, when it was submitted, in that kind of date time format, and a grade link that you could click that would bring them right to that activity to grade it. In the case that it was, the case that there was a quiz that had an essay question that required grading. This won't, the way I've set it up, it won't populate a quiz that is only multiple choice, that doesn't have any elements that require manual grading. So let's take a look at what it looks like and how it appears in the web a little bit. Please give me a confirmation if you would. I'm going to click to share my screen. And I'm not sure, can any of you see my screen right now, or did I miss something? It appears that I clicked on the link that I need to. Yes, I know that the cat is my cat. This is Ernie. He's diving under the ping pong table to grab a ball. Okay. Thank you, Stefan. I clicked the icon that you would click to share your screen, but it does not appear that it has done anything. It just has a little green check by it. Is there any kind of presentation leader rights or something you should grant so that I can do that?
No, you're the presenter, Ben.
Okay.
You've got at the top left, you've shared the screen, yeah?
Yeah, indeed.
And did you get a window at the bottom with a bottom left where the webcam normally is with anything?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it now. Very well. Thank you very much. I see that maybe it takes a moment now. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it was there and then it went.
Oh. Okay. Gone again. Okay. Very good. Can you see my screen now? Yes, okay, fantastic. I tend to prefer to work in Chrome. This is an instance of this report in our production environment where I have Tommy Test, who has submitted a number of different activities. One of the contingencies of this report that I created, this is a grade everything report as is shown here on the right of this breadcrumb trail, is that I will only see output for students that are enrolled in a course that I'm assigned to as a teacher, as an editing teacher. So Tommy Test has submitted activities that are in a course I'm a teacher of. So if I click to grade one of these, it's going to bring up an assignment to grade where I can create comments. It just brings me to where I would either rate or provide comments, and I could provide Tommy with a rating in this context. Once I rate him, we'll notice if I refresh that those items have disappeared and they'll no longer be there. And additionally, with the quiz, you can see this is a place where this is using a Poodle plugin, I believe. Tommy has scribbled on top of a map. So I could comment, and then this would go away as well, too. I could give him some mark for this, and his results would go away as well, too. So that is an example of what that report looks like. Let's see. Did the screen sharing stop now? I still see a blue line around everything. Okay. Very good. So how does it work to utilize an ad hoc report? If you have not already added it, I would encourage you in a test site to add the configurable reports block so you can become more familiar with that, and just make sure that that works in your site configurations. Once you add a new report, then you can update the basic settings, provide a title, and add a query. You could go to the ad hoc page and find one of those. You may need to test the report and change some different variables if you have unique table elements in your database, or depending on how you've configured your roles, if your student role is something other than 5, for instance, or if you have a unique teacher role that you want to make sure that there's a dependency on, that you're indicating the right role. So there are strings attached to some of these different queries I've shared. At Blue Sky, we have, we're all online school, and we have some unique dependencies. But just in addition to what's unique about our school, I've found that there are some interesting things regarding the assignment module, particularly, that make it a bit difficult to write concatenated link for. I'm kind of curious. Please share something in the chat if you're familiar with this. But have any of you encountered the Rownum concatenated link that's associated with assignments. Is this familiar to any of you? Perhaps not. So with the assign module, there are some there are many capabilities, and I love that you have lots of different options with Poodle. If you haven't checked out that plugin, they can make it great to submit multiple different kinds of options for students. But with this Rownum dependency, or the kind of sort that's required for the logic behind that plugin, it makes it difficult to make a URL that is going to bring a grading teacher directly to what they need to grade. And there's different ways you can go about that. So for instance, if you're not familiar with what the Rownum is, when you hover over it, this is an example that shows you where that will be displayed in the URL when you click to grade something from the typical kind of grading interface in Moodle. And because the Rownum number is something that's not stored in a table in Moodle, it's something that's relevant to session logic. It's not some data you could pull from the database. You have to find a different way to go about making a clickable link for a teacher when making a grading report like I've done. So you can either emulate the Rownum in the URL string by emulating the same kind of sort that's used, or you can avoid using that Rownum logic with doing some alterations to the assign plugin so it doesn't require that in the URL string. So what's the difference? As I explained a little bit about, if you use the Rownum, you have to create the same sort order that the current user is using. So this can be a trick, and I have some logic for that query on the ad hoc reports page as well. But I've, for the most part, stayed away from that because it basically requires that the teacher can't sort if you're going to use that kind of logic for the report. Alternatively, there's some different logic that was shared by somebody else in GitHub, in the wild, as some of you might like to call. And we've utilized that kind of logic so that we can avoid using Rownum in the URL string for assign module marking. So instead, it looks like this, where you use the user ID without Rownum. And I understand for some parties that prefer to have blind marking and can't display that user ID, that could be a problem. I'd be curious to hear if you could say something in the chat. Do any of you use blind marking at your institutions? Yay and nay? I largely suspect that most don't, but maybe at some higher ed institutions you want to preserve that kind of instance where a faculty member would not know. Gotcha. I would love to get some more information out there. We could somehow there's this tie-in to blind marking, and so maybe I'll put out a ticket on the Moodle tracker for that. But I know that that's been well discussed before, and logic hasn't moved away from Rownum for a while. So one of the challenges with this, if you are to use the kind of different logic that doesn't require Rownum for creating this concatenated link for assign marking, then you need to be able to update your Moodle and be able to change that core plugin. If that's something that's a challenge for you, it might make this a little bit of a challenge. But I would talk with your host and with your technical staff and see if that's something that's possible for you. So for the quiz, there is one dependency, and there's a plugin that I just absolutely love called Manually Grading by Student. And what's really awesome about this particular plugin is it allows you to go to grade all of one user's responses for a particular activity or assessment instead of manually grading all the same question for a bunch of students in a particular activity. So you can be student-specific instead of activity and an essay question specific. So here's an example. You could grade all of the essay questions that require manually grading for a particular student that I've fuzzed out in this instance. So filters can be really useful when you want to display a bunch of information for a course or your site, but then allow your staff to drill down into a deeper level. And it's fairly simple, adding these kind of filters that are abilities within the Configurable Reports block. You want to add the filter selection. You also need to add a piece of SQL code in to apply that filter within the code and try it out. Looks a little bit something like this. So in the Filters tab in Configurable Reports, you need to first add that filter in there. And these are a couple common filters that I'm showing just as an example, for both for courses and enrolled students. And then in the code, you click on a custom SQL to edit your SQL, and you would apply those related filters in the code. Something that I discovered that was very useful too as well, I'm going to post a link in the chat here. There was a gentleman who posted a cumulative list of all the variables and filters, and this is also in the course resources too. If you want to explore what other kinds of filters would be useful to your school, I would encourage you to check that out. And even though I don't list it here, probably the most useful filter I found, or if you need to double filter something, would be to add a search text option that you could make relative to a certain variable, and I would consider using that. I'll show an example of that time permitting a little bit later. So this is what it would look like where you could have a course dropdown and that student filter once you have those entered, and then you can get to those particular results you're looking for. Just to make sure to allow you an option, I've been providing you with a lot of information. I want to give you a chance to say something or just take a stretch for those of you that's maybe the middle of the night, or if it's just the evening time and you've had a long day helping all the different iMoot presenters. Thank you all those for helping. Please take a moment to stretch. Just keep your eyes open. This again is my wonderful 25-pound tabby cat, Ernie. Before I move along are there any questions regarding any of those filters or the different dependencies that I've previously listed? Thank you, Stefan. So one of the wonderful things that I like about the Configurable Reports block is the ability to grant permissions based on role or a specific user. Sometimes I'll create a report for a specific identity where there's maybe a supervisor or some kind of lead role that there should only be access to that one staff member. And I might make it a global report or in a specific context of a course. But it's great to be able to assign permissions just based on these different kinds of role, whether it's administrative faculty. We have advising staff advisors that are like sometimes like you might consider a student coach, counselors, or social workers, and we've created roles in our Moodle for these each of these different kinds of personnel. So I would consider doing that or looking into that if you have not previously done that. I'll give you a brief overview of how you can assign a report based on a role. First, you'd wish to add a permission type, add a filter such as role, and try it out. So first you want to start by clicking on the Permissions tab, and you can select in the drop-down menu the user with the selected role in that the current report course. You may select a different option. Sometimes I'll use the user field value and just determine what the ID number of that user is, and that's how I could assign it to a particular person. Going along with this example, I've chosen the editing teacher role, so I want to make sure that just the person who is listed as a teacher for that course can have access to that. And in this example, I gave it the title only for office staff, just to kind of point to the fact that it could be to a particular role. But if I were to enable just the editing teacher, it would be anybody who's a teacher in that course would have access to that report. So I would encourage you to check out, and this is the link that I had shared in that chat. Go ahead and take a look here. There's lots of other different kinds of filters you could apply to a Configurable Reports plugin. Just to keep a check on where you're at, and if it's late night for you, I couldn't believe that this is how many times I've blinked this year. Got a lot of big numbers. So I'm not sure if any of you have had a moment to look in this discussion that I'd shared earlier. I'd encourage you to do that if you want to take time after this presentation to consider what reports you'd like to create or what other people have already created. But I'd like to propose something that we're considering at Blue Sky creating. And one new kind of report we're looking at creating is a student dashboard view. And for a long time, we've had a student dashboard view present in our SIS. We use Genius. But we've considered having this instead be in Moodle so that we could make it a part of that and lessen the dependency of student and parent navigation to our SIS site. So I'm kind of curious, just to do a quick checker poll, if you could write something in the chat. How many of you have considered creating any kind of student-based reports? We've created a lot of staff reports, but have any of you created any reports that are specifically for a student or parent role? Wonderful, Jennifer. If that is the case, we definitely have done that less, and we haven't utilized reports for the student and parent role. And actually, we don't currently have a parent role in our Moodle. I know that a lot of other institutions have done that. So that's something that we're currently considering. If you have, Jennifer, please share some of the reports that you've created in that forum, in the linked forum I provided. So here's a view of what this looks like in our SIS. We have different information that displays a course, a grade. This quality figure is actually the percentage of how a student is performing and only what they've submitted, so that we can see if there's a deficit in the case of this student example where they might be completing B work, but their overall course grade, the way that our staff have set up the grading methodology, is they're only 22% along in the course. And so they wouldn't pass if we're near the end of the term, in other words. Good question, Eric. He asks about filtering. With current course user, should this be showing all users in the site or just users enrolled in the course? It could depend on how you structure the initial query. Sometimes I might set up a query to be course specific, so then if you filter by the course user, the first gate is really, the first filter is what you set up in the query to only be those users that are enrolled in the course. And then the additional filter you apply with the configurable reports logic could be the user you select that's enrolled in that course. And you could do it differently depending on what kind of report you're doing. If you're doing one that's based on or something that's maybe more at a site level, you might wish to keep that more open. This is an example of what a report that I begin to construct looks like in Moodle. You know what? I didn't change this wording. I'm sorry about that. This is what it looks like in the configurable reports, where you can see that Tommy Test has 22% in this life skills, and he has a quality work rate of 0.96%. Now, the issue with this, and I've just set up a base response. I cased out this to-do column. The design of this is how many activities a student would have to do, and that's what we have here. But there's certain logic wrapped around this that we've already taken into account in our SAS that requires further development for a Moodle report. And one of the missing elements that we don't currently have in our Moodle is the duration or the start and end dates that a student is expected to be present or enrolled in a course in Moodle. Right now, that's data only present in our SAS, our Student Information System. So to make this fully functional with configurable reports, we'd have to add on to an integration that would allow that information to be shared back into Moodle. So as I've noted, there's a few missing pieces to that dashboard view that we will plan to work on, such as the start and end dates. But if this is something that you're interested in, I have a fascination for not only getting the targeted teacher data that is relevant to helping them improve their workflows so that they can move along their job and have the data they need, or as Eric had shared in an earlier presentation today, helping target some of the data that the teachers might be missing. He had shared a little about if a teacher had not marked something extra credit, but yet didn't check the extra credit box so that it would be aggregated in the gradebook correctly. Things such as that are great for teachers, and I want to dig further into what the students and the parents need so that they can take advantage of some updated views in the LMS and Moodle as well. We don't use SCORM packages at Blue Sky, but I love the question you're making, and this brings me back to a point that I don't think I've made yet, is that what also instigated me creating some teacher grading reports, click-to-grade reports, was Blue Sky's dependency on some marking blocks such as the FN marking block, as well as, somebody will maybe have to help me out. There is another, like a quick grader or some marking block such as that, that would only do standard forums and quizzes and had a lot of holes with assignments. And with both of those marking blocks, there were a lot of holes with assigned type activities, and a number of them wouldn't be able to see drafted assignments, for instance. So there was a lot of holes in some of the outcomes where staff couldn't find those. So along the lines of SCORM packages, what's flexible about configurable reports, if there's a different assessment your school is using, then you can add that logic in so that you can create a more well-compiled report that'll work for your faculty. So I haven't accounted for that currently, and we don't use SCORMs. That's not to say that you couldn't make that report work for you and add on the additional detail you need. Eric asks, does Blue Sky require assignment activity due dates? We don't, and part of that has to do a bit with our rolling enrollment. And we have really two paths at Blue Sky, being an all-online school. We have more of a targeted path that's more synchronous, and we have an asynchronous path where students will start at various times throughout the semester. The more synchronous path of students, with those, we call them our group-paced courses. Those students all should be at the same spot. And even in that case, we don't use due dates currently. And that's another thing that makes it difficult with the rolling enrollment with students that are starting and ending at different times. We have students that are completing activities all over the place. So you'll have somebody completing activities at the beginning of a term and somebody completing activities at the end of the term and near the same times. So it can make it difficult otherwise to find those activities without some kind of report that's catching each of those. So I just want to give you a little bit of insight to some of the other reports we've created in case any of these are of interest to you or if you have any questions about some of these different ones. So I'll just try my best to share briefly about some of these. And some are ones that work best in Configurable Reports block, or some work better perhaps in AddMiner that is a little bit less gated. AddMiner that inherently allows you to do update and insert queries where CF doesn't. And this first one that I've listed, what activities count for attendance, this is something that's particular to us. Since we're all online, we actually use a completion-based model for attendance. So based on the number of activities a student completes and some logic that we've applied based on policy, we say if a student completes so many activities, they're considered to be in attendance in a given week. And so I've created reports to be able to determine how many activities a student has completed that do count for attendance. And some different catches. I've created reports for correcting mistakenly hidden activities, finding Moodle logins by date, basically a count of how many times a student has logged in a day within a date range. We've utilized a plugin that's based off of like a quick mail plugin that uses SMS gateway so that you can essentially text students from Moodle. And it does require that there's a Moodle number in some additional profile information. So I've created a report to look for an absence of that information. And updated. We also use a synchronous meeting tool called Collaborate that's under the umbrella of Blackboard. It used to be called Illuminate, if any of you are familiar with that. So sometimes, and this is just you'll find with any plugin, there's little quirks and oddities. With Collaborate, we found that if you update the name of that specific meeting title, it won't happen to update in the grade items table. So I've developed an update query that will account for any mismatched names with those modules. And before we had used the teacher grading report that I created, as I've noted, there's issues with assignments. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies around that, and some of the grading plugins that we used initially, like the FN marking block, that did a better job of catching assign submissions. There are still issues with catching drafted assignments and whether teachers would want to mark drafted assignments or not. So we were able to identify which assignments were submitted by students, the assign module activities, and were drafted and not actually fully submitted, and may require marking if the teacher would allow for that. So those were some examples of different reports I've created to help either catch things or for the sake of awareness. With any and all of these kind of reports, it's an art, and it's a kind of like music. It's a creative kind of endeavor where you have to keep honing it and work on it, and you're going to make mistakes. I know that I have. As has been brought up before, whether you create a well-tailored query or something that needs some tweaking with staff communication. I have made my share of mistakes, and I'm more than happy to do that, because it always making mistakes can be a great learning process, and something will yield in the end a positive outcome. So as I'm wrapping up, I just want to open it up to anybody who has any questions, wants to dive into any particular aspects of something I've shared. Here's a list of some of the different things that I've also linked to on the course page. I'd encourage you to, if you have any reports that I've shared about that you're more interested in, would like to get some more information, please don't hesitate to write me back, either in the forums listed in the iMoot course, or to write me at ben@blueskyschool.org. I want to say many thanks to all the people that have helped with hosting this presentation today, setting it up, the creator of this block, to other presenters like Eric. It's great to see other people utilizing these kinds of plugins, and I'm really interested with connecting with Jennifer and with other people that are creating some interesting reports. I'm going to make sure to stick around. I'm not sure if you have any questions or any thoughts you'd like to share, but I want to open it up to all of you if you have any questions for me or interesting stories you'd like to share. And unfortunately, my cat is not here to jump on camera to say hello as well, too. Here's a question for all of y'all who are sticking around for a minute. Are any of you all using any flavor of SQL that's different than MySQL? Are any of you migrating to MS SQL or anything else? If you happen to be familiar with your hosted solution and what you're using? Great question, Andy. I wonder if any of your teachers are resetting their courses. One thing that I've noted, that's a very interesting dilemma. I know that some institutions will start with a totally fresh Moodle installation each year, so that might be a roadblock for you. We don't do that, and we'll preserve course data if our teachers are aware that if they don't reset their course, past year data will be present for students, and you can find that. But if teachers reset their course, it's going to delete the attempt data for assignments or quizzes, and that won't be present any longer. One of the things, and actually, Andy, I just remembered something that I left up that I'd love to show you if you'll stick around for a minute. I created a report that's specifically designed to look for grades for students. So here's a report that I call it unenrolled student grades. There's a grade table in Moodle that's a grades history table. So based on that, I created a report so that if a student isn't enrolled in something any longer, and let's say there's a parallel section of that course that's offered at a later time, but it's not the same literal course in Moodle, it's identical or similar content, but the teacher wants to be able to transfer their grades. I've created this report so I can look up the grade detail for that student that's no longer enrolled. So in this case, and this is an example of a filter where I related it to the student's username. So I could clear this out. Initially, what displays, and this is based on the context of what course you happen to be in when you first load the report. So it's course specific. And then you need to apply some username to single out the student user you're looking for. If this is something that might be interesting to you, if you'd like to hear a little bit more about, let me know. I'd be happy to share. I haven't put this one on ad hoc reports, but let me know if this is something that might be of interest to you. If you're looking for the past grades and you happen to be a school that does a new Moodle installation every year, I'm not sure you'd have to talk to your tech support and figure out how you can access those in old installations. I'm not sure what manner of archiving would be used, or if they leave it somehow accessible in a way that allows teaching staff or other staff to get into an archived year's Moodle installation. But in that kind of context, if you could get into that data, then you could still use that kind of report to access grade history information, even if the student isn't enrolled in the course any longer. Any other questions from folks? You're all so quiet. I'm tempted just to bust out an instrument and start playing something for you guys and keep it interesting. The groups. Thank you, Guido. I can show you a report. Let me ask you this. Are you interested in just what we're doing within the report, or would you like to see the sequel about how we've accounted for groups and grouping logics? Okay. Let me share my screen again, and I'll show you some different queries. Now, I'm trying to think of what the best one is going to be. This is the teacher grading report. Actually, this is where I'll join the different tables of that. Maybe I can show you the what we use to exclude students from group activities. One interesting thing about groups and groupings, if you're unaware, is that I will love it if there's a better correlation here, but with groups and groupings, when you group an activity, when we get new students into courses, and because we have new students coming in at different times in our more asynchronous classes, if you have grouped activities that you don't want to apply to a student in the gradebook context, they need to be excluded from that. But that doesn't happen automatically, so I wrote an update query to account for that. I think I left it just in the context of our course site page. So, and there's actually two, in some context, if there's not an entry in the grades table yet, you need to insert an entry. If they already have an entry in the grades table, it requires an update. So there's both to kind of enter in there. I'll show you the update query first so you can take a look at this. So anytime I click on this, it's performing that update function, even though it just says no records found. And here I can look at the SQL. You can get a little bit of a context of here I'm looking into users that are enrolled in the course, and this is the join information that's required to look at the users enrolled in the course. I have some exclusions from different courses, as you can see. And then here is the group filter that's basically saying that that student doesn't have a grouping ID that's related to that assessment. So this is a kind of a not in statement that's saying that that relationship, that the student doesn't have a grouping relationship that's related to that assessment activity. And then when that relationship is not there, then to set that student's grades table information relative to that activity to be excluded and hidden. So I'm not sure if this kind of grouping relationship is what you're looking for, but this is what is actually finding whether or not that student is in the grouping relationship relative to that assessment. Is that the kind of logic that you're looking for, Guido? Okay. Gotcha. Please shoot me an email or something. I'd be happy to share that query or set some time aside if you want to take a little bit of a deeper look into that and see how that might apply to your institution. Cool. I would really like to utilize groups and groupings more. How I've explained it to my staff, and I'm not sure if any of you have done something a little bit more broad or large scale with this, but I like to teachers the concept that groups and groupings can be great when you have a few activities within a course that are specific to a subset of students. But if there are a lot of activities that should be different, that's when I suggest that that should really be a different sub-course, a different Moodle course entirely, if there's so many that are different. But sometimes we might have a teacher that'll have a whole unit's worth of activities that are specific to a subset of students. We have more of an alternative school in Minnesota where we have more at-risk students. So there might be, in some cases, a unit that is specifically designed in a language arts course to be read by pregnant mothers, young teen moms or young mothers. I've seen that in a case where that whole unit's worth of activities is correlated to that young mother's group. But then if it got to be too much, like there were 3 or 4 units worth of activities that were entirely different, I would say that's probably a different enough track where you'd want to have an entirely different course. Again, I want to make sure to thank all the people from iMoot and Pukunui and all the different places that have helped put this on. This is amazing. This is so great for me to be able to participate in a kind of an activity like this with this much flexibility. So I think it's fun to those people that are helping put this on. And at this time, I probably should start doing other activities at about 1 Central our time. Any other kind of closing thoughts or comments or questions from folks?
Hi, Ben. I'd just like to say on behalf of all the people here, I think that was a great presentation. Lots of really useful information for something that is a very tricky subject, and a lot of teachers I know have problems with this. And so I'm sure that everybody is very grateful that you've covered it in such depth and offered so much support to us. So a big thank you from us. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will be coming back to you for more information at a later date.
Thank you.